Ask the MP. The Right Honourable is in the hot seat. Ask the MP with Farai on CFM Stereo.
Ask the MP is only on ZFM Stereo, my station, your station. Thank you for tuning in this Tuesday evening. My name is Farai Mwakutuya, and this is a program we bring you every Tuesday where different members of parliament are brought into the studio and we give them an opportunity to speak to you as Zimbabweans, and also for you to speak to them, to engage with them, to ask them questions, to hold them to account, and to interact with them. This effort is driven by you, the listeners, and so we value your input. Get in touch with us, 0772 168 045. That is to call us in the studio, 0772 168 045 or 0731 168 045. That is the WhatsApp number, but we obviously prefer for you to call us direct and speak to us. It's always better to hear you live and in person. 0772 168 045. The WhatsApp number is 0731 168 045. Now, tonight I am talking about, I suppose, what has been the talk of the town in the country for the past just over 24 hours, because that is when this much awaited, eagerly anticipated list of externalizers was published, and since then people have had different things to say about it. Tonight that is the focus of our discussion, to try and find out A, what our parliamentarians think about it, B, what this all means to us, and C, what they intend to do going forward, given the people, the names that appear on this list, and to safeguard and perhaps ensure that we don't find ourselves in a similar situation going forward. Let me introduce the panel I have in the studio at the moment, and I say at the moment because I know some of the MPs are still en route and we anticipate their arrival at any point now. Honourable Oliver Mandipaka is the MP for Buhera North. Sir, it's been a while since we've last heard you here on ZFM Stereo. It's great to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Buhera West.
Buhera West. Thank you for that correction. Honourable Oliver Mandipaka, representing the ruling ZANU PF, MP for Buhera West. Thank you so much. We are also joined by a political and public policy analyst, Richard Mahomva. Richard, great to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us.
Equal pleasure as well.
Great. We have in the studio at the moment as well, just joining us, Honorable David Chapfika. He's been on this program several times before. He is perhaps a great person to have in the studio because he deals with matters of budget, finance and economic development. He chairs that portfolio committee. Honorable Chapfika is also the legislator for Motoko South constituency. Honorable, as always, it's always a pleasure to have you. We thank you so much for being here, for joining us, for gracing us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you, listeners.
We are waiting, and we had confirmation from Honorable Gift Chimanikire. He is the legislator from the MDCT, and we anticipate his arrival anytime soon. We hope that Honorable Gift Chimanikire will be able to join us very shortly. But so far, those are the three I have in the studio: Richard Mahomva, an analyst, Honorable David Chapfika, and Honorable Oliver Mandipaka. We are, of course, talking about that list of externalizers published yesterday, eagerly anticipated, I say, because people had waited 90 days. There was a further extension, and then eventually the list came out. Opinions have been different on what people think about that. Let me begin with you, Honorable Mandipaka, and say, look, was this list worth the wait?
Indeed, and let me begin by thanking the new administration under the leadership of His Excellency, the President of the Republic, Honorable Idim Nangagwa, for living true to his word, because he promised that he would name and shame these individuals and corporates that were externalizing funds, and this has come at the right time. In other words, what we are basically saying is that this new government, this new dispensation, could not wait to sweep things under the carpet that were going wrong for a while. That's why they've thought of publicizing these corporates and individuals.
Honorable Chapfika, when whether on social media, whether in public spaces, wherever you go, I think people had this anticipation that there would be some very big names, very prominent names. There aren't any there, but let me also hasten to say that perhaps some of the big names that people thought they would see and all that, we do know that there were some people who have complied and they are not being named. But let me not pass judgment. The fact that there aren't any prominent personalities, any big names, any controversial names, does that take away from the credibility of this list at all?
Well, not really, At times, if you are a public figure, you expect to be on the spotlight. And all public figures, not only in Zimbabwe, worldwide, we are perceived as looters, as thieves, irrespective of our background, irrespective of what we do, our capacities, etc. So, let the records shame the devil. Let the information available shame the devil. I am not saying that there are no public figures who could have been involved. Okay? If they are involved, it's up to the people in the private sector. Okay, but it takes two to tango. There is no way a member of parliament or a minister, for that matter, or anybody in public service would take 20 million in his bag and move across the border. Okay, what would happen is that you would transact through a bank, and usually you would use banks which are or through registered institutions. So, and it takes two to tango. And in any fraudulent transaction that I have learned of between a private sector and public sector, the player and the provider of resources, okay, it's not the public, it's not treasury. The money usually comes from the private sector. So let's wait and see. Let's not be too fussy about it. I think what has been released by and large is the names of corporates. And we will eventually, people would demand that we want to know who are the individuals behind these names. That's the critical issue.
Honorable Chavika, you raise a very, a very pertinent point there. You said that these transactions happen through banking channels and banking systems. Now, why is it that it's only corporates that we're seeing there? Why aren't banks being taken to task? Because they were the conduits through which this money was being channeled and taken out. Why is it that they are not in the spotlight at all?
The role of banks is to deal in foreign currency, to buy and sell foreign currency. And usually the people who transact, they submit export documentation or import documentation. So it's purely, the onus is on the person who has said, I am importing 100 computers for $10,000. And then if you submit an invoice from a US supplier, yes, okay, and the foreign currency is available, the bank will avail that money as long as you have got that money in your account, or maybe it's through a bank facility. The bank will avail that, but the onus to discharge, what is called in banking circles, to discharge the import documents, to confirm that you have actually imported. There are import documents that you have to submit to the bank to confirm, for them to discharge that the money which went out of the country, goods were actually received, and it is now dispensed of. It is that information that the banks are using, okay, to pin down these corporates. Because I have heard one or two people, I think in radio here and there, complaining that but we have discharged our documentation. In some cases, it's export document CD1s and so forth. Okay. But let's keep these things simple for the benefit of listeners.
Yes.
So there are documentation to be submitted to the bank, and the challenge is that there are others. Maybe there could also be mistakes, okay, with the commercial banks. But those issues now will be narrowed down in time, very soon, because banks, it is easy for them to pick up those documents, and the onus now is on those people that have been listed on that list to go to the bank to say, no, I'm innocent. The amount you are referring to is, these are the papers. Sorry, I forgot to submit them to you. I actually imported the goods.
And here's the proof.
Yes. Or the funds which I loaned to Joe Block in Botswana, okay, under your authority, under some exchange control authority, has actually been repatriated under this, but I forgot to. So that onus would be with the person who approached the bank to transact.
Let me bring in our final panelist here. He doesn't wear any political or partisan lines, so perhaps he will give us a different perspective. Richard, your take on this list, and if indeed it is what maybe many people were anticipating and expecting.
First and foremost, maybe let me preface my presentation by giving the conceptual and the contextual framing of issues at hand. First and foremost, I think we need to be clear on what we mean by externalization of funds, which to me speaks of illicit financial flows as a result of export proceed acquittal deficits and spurious import transactions, as well as illegal exportation of currencies, of foreign currency, of assets. So basically, if we try and look at the broader issue at the end, you discover that the mining sector and even certain sectors that are responsible for managing our natural resources base are actually topping this list. So what does this mean? It means that the natural resource sector has been stripped of particular strategic resources, and hence this is important that the government has taken such an initiative. But you asked about the issue of the anticipation around this. What I see is a situation whereby there's been a conflict of expectations, a situation whereby a list that is raised by the government becomes illegitimate because of particular essential political partisan expectations to say we want that person to be on that particular list. But what most people fail to come to terms with is that when we're dealing with such issues, we need an empirical or a scientific or a realist or a pragmatic base of appreciating these issues. So what should we be questioning is, where is civic society to challenge the list that has been presented by the government? Where is the opposition to challenge the list that has been presented by government? And that can be a starting point of raising an important argument. But without that, really, we can say the government has done well to put in place solid structures of promoting accountability.
Let me come back to you, Honorable Madipaka. Yes, I think this is very unprecedented in terms of what we've seen. It shows that there seems to be a commitment, to do what has been committed to doing, and also to try and tackle issues of corruption. Now, I want to bring this down to the level of the common man who is saying, okay, you've done your list. Does that still mean now I can go to the bank and get money? Because again, Richard spoke about crisis of expectations. The expectation that many people might have is, if we are saying money was taken out and part of it is now back, surely I should be able to get some money out of the bank. But that's not necessarily the reality.
Not really, but it's a starting point. It's a good starting point for any government which is in power to be able to recover certain assets and our finances that has been externalized. I think that's a good starting point. But suffice to say, this matter, this issue at government's disposal needs a lot of interrogation. You'd find at the end of the day, there are a lot of legal technicalities to be brought to the fore. And so, in my view, I would expect that government will come up with a correct team that looks at these matters individually and not severally. Because at the end of the day, you'd find that it won't be in the interest even of this nation to prosecute. Maybe it's in the interest of this nation to make sure that we recover certain process that has been externalized.
And prosecute where in some cases some of these companies aren't operational anymore. For instance, we know that diamond operations are now under a consolidated company. Some of the companies that are listed there, how will we ever be able to recover them, and what happens?
We won't be able to. That's why we are saying it is a complex matter which needs due diligence to be looked at from a perspective where perhaps at the end of the day the winner is the government. Now, if the government wins, obviously, yes, to some extent, the man on the street is going to benefit from that exercise. So what we need is again a learning point that we need good corporate governance in all our systems, in all what we do, especially in the parastatals that have been listed and in the corporates that have been listed. And from a parliament point of view, we also need to strengthen our oversight role. So that at the end of the day, we don't have these issues going out of hand to the extent which we are now seeing as a country.
Honorable Chafika, I want to throw this ball in your court because of the committee that you chair in terms of what you intend to do, to ensure that there's follow-up on these cases that we've seen, that whether it is prosecution or we recover the money or we just forgive them, I don't know. People want to know, what are you going to do as a committee or in terms of this, but also the point that has been raised by your counterpart Vamandi Parker, because you talk about the issue of CD1s, you talk about, it's a responsibility of me, the exporter or the importer, to submit documentation and things like that. Yes, I agree. But surely, as the regulator, Reserve Bank must have been aware and must have known who money was allocated to, that money went out. Why did they allow this list to become as big as it is and not be alarmed? Surely they should have acted on this a bit earlier.
My heart bleeds at times when we discuss these issues. The role of any parliamentary committee through oversight is more of auditing on the basis of existing legislation. Have you complied with the existing legislation? If the ministry or government or quasi-government institution has complied with the stated statutes, there is no way we could pin down anybody. We, as a country, coming back to the externalization, as a country, we had a period when we had a governor, names not mentioned, when we had a governor who actually authorized, through loose, irresponsible exchange control regulations, that individuals can take 100,000 out of the country without any questions. I just said, is this okay? In America, a multi-trillion-dollar economy, you cannot take more than 5,000 in cash. But in this country, during the transition from the Zim dollar into multi currencies, a governor who prevailed on the central bank at that time allowed $100,000 individuals to take that money. And how do you, if that person takes that money, is his money in his account, and he takes it, he did not know that maybe he should invest offshore or not. Okay, maybe he's got other commitments out there. Who knows? So those are some of the challenges. It is the role of the central banks, not only in Zimbabwe, I think in the entire developing world, to know what we need to do, what we should focus, for our economies to grow to be middle income, as it is alluded to by His Excellency Honorable Mnangagwa, that we need to be by 2030 a middle income economy. But we cannot achieve that if we have no ethical practice, if there are no ethics, if there are no work ethics. And now during the hyperinflation period, so to digress a bit, you find that people, I was in banking when I started, people who came from universities and they ended themselves in foreign dealing rooms, they made so much money, more than the owners of the business. They were driving Porsche cars, buying 2015 houses, and you wondered because there were distortions. There were distortions in the exchange rate. There was what was referred to as bank rate and what was referred to as parallel market rate. And that seems to be emerging again now, that distortion, where you have now a multiplicity of pricing. If you want to pay for goods and services, we are told this is an eco cash price, this is a telegraphic transfer, an RTGS rate, this is that rate, this is a cash rate, this is a US dollar rate, this is a bond note rate, and so forth. So as long as we have got no adequate instruments to deal with that, the central bank has got no adequate instruments, and it's there, you see, because money, because the foreign currency, once central bank legislated, the government legislated that the economy is now using multi currency and stated the currencies that are to be used, those currencies became medium of exchange in Zimbabwe. And therefore, within the borders of this country, the responsible authority is the government of Zimbabwe through the Central Bank of Zimbabwe.
Honorable, because you have a background in finance, you will obviously be able to assist us on this. I've heard people put forward this argument, and maybe you can clarify it for us. That issue you talk about multiple currencies. Some people have said that because this is not our own currency, that these are US dollars or South Africans or whatever, you cannot be charged with externalizing because you're not externalizing Zimbabwe's currency.
There is that misconception. It's actually a misconception. Okay, there was the use of multi currencies was gazetted, and the currencies that were available for use for circulation in Zimbabwe were also listed together. Okay, with the bond note. Okay, bond note, US dollar, euro, pound, Botswana pula, rand, etc. Those currencies were declared as available for use as a medium of exchange and for use in Zimbabwe. So in essence, they became a de facto Zim dollar, okay? Well, they substituted the Zim dollar for the purposes of circulation. Yes, they are not our currencies, but provide as long as they are earned, okay, through by goods and services in Zimbabwe. Okay, if you bought gold that are in Zimbabwe with US dollars and the money is circulating here, it came because the money can't just come here. Any monies that come here, they would have come here pursuant a transaction, either through buying groceries or through investment in mines, through investment in manufacturing concerns, etc. Okay, in one form or another. So once that money comes, pursuant a transaction, that money belongs to Zimbabwe. And it is the custodian of the people of Zimbabwe is the president, and he manages that through the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe as the monetary authority and also as the financial advisor to the government through the Minister of Finance. So that money really is not mine, it's not yours, as long as if you take that money through what is called transfer pricing, where you inflate the export price, the export prices, you understate the exports and then you overstate the imports.
Then
because that's transfer pricing. That's what it's referred to as transfer. Because you are transferring, you are inflating the prices of the goods that you are importing and understating the goods that you are exporting, and in the process prejudicing the economy of Zimbabwe. So it's important that I think people of Zimbabwe understand that. But I think the major challenge was that period where we had loose control, authorized exchange control. So it's going to be very, very dynamic. I think I see challenges
in terms of this.
Yes.
Let me just remind listeners that we have in the studio Honorable David Shafika, Honorable Oliver Mandipaka, and Richard Mahomva. We had confirmation and are still waiting for the arrival of Honorable Gift Chimanikire of the MDCT. I do see some listeners getting in touch and saying, why is there no opposition MP here? We invited Honorable Gift Chimanikire. He confirmed, and as we're still trying to get a hold of him now. His phone is not reachable, and I hope that he's on his way, or if he's listening and tuning in, he can still come through and join us. So Honorable Gift Chimanikire was invited and had confirmed to those listeners who've been questioning that, and we still await his arrival. We do welcome him and would look forward to his contribution. Richard, let me come to you very quickly before I turn to the many listeners that are coming, contributions coming through from our listeners. Both the MPs have said this is going to be tricky. It's going to be a headache. I suppose even uncharted territory. It's something that we've never tried to pursue or go after before. What is your view in terms of how all this will pan out? Will it, because I've heard even some people suggesting that, this could open the door for defamation, where someone will say, but, there were mistakes made. I am okay now. You've created impression that I violated the law. How do you see this panning out? Very quickly.
I think what's important is that whilst we have identified the problem, really factoring in that some of the companies are said to be under liquidation, some being closed and all of that. I think what is important is the need for the central bank really to be strengthened in terms of its mandate, such that this becomes an opportunity for it to erase its lethargy. I think that is important. And broadly speaking, this should address broader matters of public sector mismanagement that has been prevailing. I think that should be the roadmap that we take, because at the end of the day, to expect any recoveries really is not something that is logical and feasible.
Contributions coming through from our listeners. I want to begin with one that has come through, which I think raises a very good point. It comes from Zaku in Kwekwe. Zakuza, and he says, I'm in Kwekwe. He says, Honorable, we also have a list of people who actually stole state monies and not a list of people who sent their own money to better foreign banks for safekeeping. Earlier on social media, I saw someone saying, look, let's also get the tax authority to give us a list of people who've been defaulting. So very important point there now. The panel is taking note of these and we'll be able to respond to some of them. I want to take quite a few. I have a question. The externalization laws were made when the Zimbabwe dollar was legal currency, and now Forex is the currency in use. How will they prosecute? I think Honorable Chapfika has just responded to that. This issue is going to give His Excellency a great headache. How can that be possible to prosecute all the mentioned companies and individuals? This is going to die a natural death. Nothing can be done because they will mention other big names in government having contributed to the externalization. That is from Lambo in Kariba. He says, again, this issue of there might be other, big figures, big wigs who may ensure that or facilitate or lead to nothing happening with these cases, and I'll allow the MPs to respond in terms of what they can do or what they are possibly looking to do to ensure that these things don't die a natural death. Did the relevant authorities engage the alleged culprits to ensure that we give correct information to the public? I think the respective banks did not make follow-ups on their clients, requesting them to clear their names before publicizing. Teacher B. Bonda Mission says externalization of funds crippled the financial fabric in Zimbabwe. I would like to applaud the current government for taking such a bold decision to bring back all the externalized money. Those who do not comply should face the music. No favors, please. Let me stop at teacher's contribution because I want to ask a question here, which, it's great. We know it's about 1.5 billion we're trying to recover, but these look like the formal transactions that have a paper trail. At one point, not very long ago, 3-4 years ago, you could go to an ATM, you could withdraw $5,000 in cash, you could go into a banking hall, withdraw all sorts of amounts of cash. We could possibly have lost a lot more through money that was going across the border as physical banknotes, as hard cash. Honorable Mandipaka, your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Capital flight is an offense in Zimbabwe, but though it might be very difficult to prove. My view is that fighting crime is a collective responsibility. Even fighting corruption is a collective responsibility. It's not the responsibility of government alone, it's a responsibility of everyone, every citizen. So like the listener has said, if there are any names that he's aware of, I think those have to be brought to the attention of the authorities so that cases are properly investigated, meticulously investigated at the end of the day. Where there is need for prosecution, where a prima facie case is shown itself, then there's no reason why government should not prosecute. But where there is no prima facie case, it presents some difficulties. And at the end of the day, it is a question of mutual understanding between government and the corporates, or else the individual, after having given explanations. That's why I'm saying we have a tricky situation here, which needs careful analysis, very careful analysis. We need economists, we need lawyers, we need police that are equipped with the skills to be able to investigate these matters. We also need the Reserve Bank. We need almost everyone around this matter.
And there is also then the danger, as you say, Honorable Mandipaka, that where there's no prima facie case, and again, I want to bring it down to the ordinary citizen who saw a list of over 1,000 names being accused of having externalized money. Then all of a sudden you come back and tell me that 800 of those are pasina nyaya. I then feel, so something, maybe money changed hands, or maybe some influence was brought to bear. Again, a crisis where we'll now point to you as our MPs.
Thank you very much. That's a good question. I think the public has to be educated to understand that this is only an allegation that is coming from government, from what they've seen so far. But then, at some later stage, there's need for a thorough investigation to be able to point to a criminal offense. In the absence of that, there's no way you can prosecute when there's no prima facie case. So, what needs to be done is to look at cases as they are brought to our attention, case by case, to be able to distinguish whether there is a prima facie case which needs prosecution, whether there is a case where you need just to mediate. So these are just allegations that the state is alleging that these corporates and individuals, to some extent, externalize some funds out of the country. So I think our publics will understand when we say it's an allegation that needs to be proved at the end of the day beyond reasonable doubt for any prosecution, successful one, to take place.
Baba Comfort is asking a question. I'll put it to you, Honorable Chapfika, saying, ko mazimari anema money changers ari kubva kupi? Surely mazimari aya ari kubva somewhere in the banking system. Why is the government not initiating a crack team to tackle the issue of money changers, yet people are not accessing their money from the banks?
Well, I think that is a major challenge. And it all boils down on the demise of ethical practice on the people of Zimbabwe, particularly the youth. The youth of today, they are going for quick wins, okay, because they have observed the people that they went to university with, okay, and maybe they have left university 2-3 years, and when they meet them in the streets, they find them driving the most expensive modern cars. We are at the moment as Parliament, we are dealing with those cases. I will not mention names of individuals young who really are playing around with the hundreds of thousands of US dollars, if not millions. Okay, and it is that unethical practice, and it's all corruption. So I'm glad that under the new dispensation, the child, what it is trying to instill transparency, okay, freedom in the people in the way you do things, remove fear in our brains, okay, allow freedom of expression, and it is my hope that we will live to that commitment and commit ourselves to ethical practice and good corporate citizenry. You see, all those companies, 1,800, these are all corporate companies, including the blood transfusion, which is allocated money. That company, is, unfortunately, it was born in Rhodesia by Ian Smith. Right? And the blood in Zimbabwe is the most expensive. And I was just shocked when I saw that the blood transfusion, okay, which is supported by the budget, okay, and it sells blood, which is donated by the people of Zimbabwe at a very high price, could also externalize. You know,
alleged.
Alleged,
Honorable
yes.
Mandipaka said.
It's not me who produced the list. The list was produced. I thought, I should do. I think I need also to comment on, before I come to that, on that list of externalization. Because it's out. You can't just leave it.
Yeah.
The government has got a burden to bring it to closure. It has to bring that list to closure. Who are the people behind that next stage? Who are the people? If they are public institutions, they will be brought to shame. Okay, if there are individuals in the private sector, which I expect that many people who are directors of private individuals, okay, and you saw that list, there are lots of Chinese in there, Indians, and the other nationalities who run companies in Zimbabwe. They were all just looting and externalizing funds. So it has to be brought to closure through the same companies must prove themselves, like I said earlier on. They must prove beyond reasonable doubt that they are innocent. Failing which they will. But coming to the money changers, the question that you asked me, is consistent with the mentality of the people. And as long, when there was this restore legacy, they disappeared all from the streets for a few days. They all disappeared. They said, oh no, things have changed. I'm sure we were arrested. Something will happen. And they all disappeared. We couldn't find them. And then they were peeping through their window saying, is there anything happening? They realized nothing was happening. They said, guys, oh, this is a toothless bulldog. Let's go back to the streets. Okay, I mean, that is, so the authorities are failing to have teeth to deal with that. Because why did they disappear? They disappeared. And as long as that is there, because the market, remember somebody asked that there are tons and tons. It's true, okay? There are tons and tons of US dollars on the streets, tons and tons of bond notes on the streets. They're not with banks. And these people are exchanging that money. And that is what fuels inflation. That is what fuels the pricing. Okay? Because the people who cannot get money at the banks, they go onto the streets, buy the foreign currency, go and buy goods across the border, wherever, Tanzania and so forth, and they charge 100%. And they take into account speculative. The pricing is speculative, taking into account the price of the goods and services in 2 or 3 months' time. So, and the inflation will not be manageable. And this is why you find that the IMF is coming with its own inflation rate, the World Bank is coming with its own inflation rate, and the Reserve Bank and government 3.2, 3.7 inflation rates, and others are projecting that it could be maybe 10 and so forth. You know? We don't know because we don't know the source. Okay, the source, it depends now with the source. The World Bank, okay, maybe is using both the informal, a combination of the informal and the formal market, when maybe the government is only using the formal pricing module. So it's important that if we have people who are unethical, I mean, the law must take its course.
True.
Okay, we asked the governor last week when I called into my committee, that can you deal with that? And he promised us that will be a thing of the past, and they will be dealing with it ruthlessly. And I think those who are on the streets be warned, okay? Their days are numbered. And I would want to believe that under the new dispensation, that is one indiscipline which must be killed very quickly.
Let me put it to you, Honorable Javik, and I don't want to seem cynical or a prophet of doom, but when you say that their days are numbered, I think my own feeling to that is, as long as we've not resolved the availability of cash, we may not see them doing it as overtly as they are doing. What they will do now is just find better hiding places to do it from, but they'll perhaps continue doing it.
No, what I am saying is, if you always find weeds in any good field, okay, but you don't want to see the weeds scattered all over, and then you don't apply herbicide on them.
True.
So that's what I'm saying.
Richard, Honorable Chapika talks about the issue of ethics, about erosion of ethics within Zimbabwe. We've got, a listener got in touch earlier and says, he says, look, the character of the people who are continuously being given sensitive jobs and or portfolios for our country leaves a lot to be desired. It would appear that there is a dearth of prudent people in Zimbabwe. Now, what's your sentiment in terms of that, and really how do we clamp down on that? Is there a way to rein it in?
First, maybe let me start off by saying there is no doubt that, like in any other atmosphere or in any other context, there is a neo-patrimonial debt that affects governance. But what we should anticipate is that, factoring in that this move made by government seeks to sanitize this debt that I'm referring to, it is critical for us to say all these issues that are emerging, the lists and the president's pronouncements, they're actually an indication of a new path that Zimbabwe is taking. So we can base on the past as much as we want, but rather we should focus on how we can particularly strengthen the progress that has been made. Because first and foremost, we should admit that a promise was made and a delivery was made. Probably now that this has triggered this debate, it is the mandate of the government, it is the mandate of the parastatals, it is the mandate of the parliament to then say, what are the rational issues that are emerging from this debate, which can be used as a prescription to change the structure of governments. I think this is what government should then say. What is it that the public is inputting into this debate, and what is it that we can extract moving ahead? Because really, I'm quite optimistic that the current transition is bringing about long-term sustainable sanitization of our corporate sector and governance.
Contributions coming through, we need to read them as and when they do come through. This program belongs to the listeners, and we allow this opportunity so the MPs can take back some of this feedback, and hopefully, it will help them address and raise issues when they are in the August House and talking about these issues. Someone here saying, isn't it better to improve our banking sector and have favorable laws? The Reserve Bank woke up one day and printed bond notes and said they are equivalent to USD. Only an idiot would leave their money in a burning house. Demonetize the bond note and you won't have people eager to take money out of the country. In 2009, I lost money. If I had $1 million, I would take it out also. Fortunately, I am unemployed and broke. Otherwise, I would be on that list. Oscar from Masvingo says the president is saying that there's about $600 million refunded from externalization. My question is, why are we still sleeping on bank pavements waiting for our salaries? Here's a listener saying, good evening. My question is, we have children in university out of Zimbabwe who are starving because the cards are all blocked. I have to source US dollars on the streets, then deposit into my bank account for the child to use his card. Our children are suffering. Very disappointed with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Here's someone saying, why not round up all money changers? Someone is feeding these money changers. Let the army round up these money changers and they will reveal their sources. Another one here saying, what if externalizers were running away from our banking system? Some of the companies use the money and are making it hard for ends to meet. My banks are hiking transaction fees. The government put up reasonable charges so that we all enjoy the banking, e.g. withdrawals. You are charged certain amounts. So someone saying, look, the banking system, perhaps we are averse to it because of those charges. But those are some of the issues. Honorable Mandipaka, your quick response to those issues.
Thank you very much. I would want to agree with someone who talked about having people that are not prudent in certain portfolios. This is very dangerous. If we look at what was happening in the past, the issue of cronyism, we cannot run away from it. It was there, it existed. Mm-hmm. And I think it's high time we should believe in the new administration. It's high time we should believe in the new dispensation, that these issues to do with cronyism and failing to put prudent people in respective portfolios that are critical, we do that at our own peril. I think there is need on our part as a people to actually wear a different jacket from that we used to wear. Honorable Chafika has talked about ethics and us being ethical. I think this is a call that we should make this evening, that as a people we should change our ways. I know very much that this economy was ravaged by the illegal economic sanctions to the extent that people thought they would live a life using criminal means. But this, I think we should make a call that it should stop. We want to start to do things the proper way. Our corporates, our private sector, public sector, everyone else, I think there's need for us to put a stop to the ills of the past and start to look ahead and support the new thinking, the new dimension being taken by His Excellency.
Please, government, act on money changers. These people are tarnishing our economic image. Brighton and Harare getting in touch and making that contribution. Thank you so much, Brighton, for getting in touch and for your contribution. The issue, Oscar in Masvingo asked the question I asked earlier about, why are we still sleeping on pavements if we've got 600 million that has come back? In my discussion, I had an opportunity to speak to the Deputy Minister of Finance yesterday, and he raises this point, which is, this money that is coming back is not coming back as banknotes, so it can't go into the banking system. It's going to replenish nostro balances, but that should then mean that companies that are on waiting lists, those periods should be shortened, but perhaps we're not seeing that yet. Honorable Chapvika, some input from you from some of the contributions we've heard?
No, thank you very much. Let me comment on the one who said, let's improve the banking sector. Yes, it's true. okay, the banking sector improvement. I don't think there is a problem with the banking sector per se, but maybe there is need for improved Reserve Bank surveillance and supervision department. That department needs to be strengthened to ensure that whatever is happening within the banking sector is ethical, to ensure that any CD1's import and export documentations are discharged within the prescribed period, which in most cases is 90 days. So if that doesn't happen, then obviously there are challenges within the banking sector. And the bond notes, somebody says, let's get rid of the bond notes. When the bond notes were introduced, the governor of the central bank, Dr. Mangushka, said he was going to limit the issuance of those bond notes to support exporters as an export incentive. And when he came to Parliament last week, he confirmed that many companies are now exporting, and many companies now have been resuscitated. Those are in the export sector, and so more specifically within the Bulawayo urban area. And he has undertaken to submit a list to us, which we are still waiting for. It said the following day, but to date we haven't received it. I'm sure I've mandated our clerk in Parliament to clerk to the committee to ensure that we get that information as soon as possible. But the intention of bond notes were, yes, it's unfortunate that now they are being used to create a distortion. And then that issue has to be addressed. It has to be addressed by the monetary authorities. We have engaged them and we are talking to them. And then the 600 million which has been repassed, I think Honorable Mandipaka addressed that issue, that this money is not coming in physical cash. Mm-hmm. Maybe if there's any physical cash, it will be very small in any case. But we see, because the bulk of this money, I'm told, is locked up in assets offshore. Mm-hmm. I just believe that whoever is dealing with all these negotiations and the repatriation will leave it to the later, okay, to say if there are houses in London or in Switzerland, those houses will be repatriated. They will be disposed of, and they were unduly earned from resources earned in Zimbabwe. No, there is no harm in somebody buying a house anywhere in the world if you earn your money out there. But if you earn your money, that must sink in the heads of the people of Zimbabwe. That if you earn your money in this country and you repatriate that money without authority, okay, to buy an asset offshore, then that's illegal. And that asset must be disposed of. And I think appropriate punishment, okay, to deter future such transaction must be, okay, imposed on such practice. And then, about these money changers, we had our beautiful soldiers. They assisted us to remove President Mugabe, the former president. Okay. Together we were with them out there, and we were on those tankers in the streets and so forth. In Parliament, we saw them in Parliament, and some police officers actually have been being frog marched, etc. and so forth. We saw that happening. Okay, why can't they frog march these vendors? I mean, because these vendors, like I said earlier on, they disappeared on their own on the eve of the new dispensation. They thought, no. But you see, they observed for about 7 days. And then they flocked back and nothing happened. And now they are now even doing it in bigger numbers. So I think our wonderful defense forces, okay, they should come again to our rescue to rescue this economy. Because it is good for the pricing of foreign currency, it is good for the pricing of goods and services in Zimbabwe, it is good for the pricing of groceries for the ordinary person in Zimbabwe. They have to assist the central bank, to assist the police, to make sure, to police these individuals, so that you can identify the source, who is financing these people. Because these are just street people. Who is financing them? There's somebody somewhere. Okay? And I don't think it's politicians. No, but politicians, I don't think the majority of us have access to that money. It's people in business. Okay? And I think the people I'm talking about who wants to externalize US dollars.
Okay, contributions coming through here. Thank you so much to all the listeners who are getting in touch with us. Let me read a few more here because we want to take as many of them as we can. Please stop calling the issues being raised as ills of the past. These things are happening in the present Zimbabwe. Let the legislators take unrelenting action against any form of lawlessness. Cash is not circulating because individuals are holding on to it, and we have to pay them to get what we must constitutionally get. Let's stop protecting corrupt individual, please. I think echoing what you've just said, Honorable Chafika. Is it fair to force bond notes on people? I don't export. Why should these useless papers be forced on me? We have a law that says it's criminal to refuse to transact with bond notes. Is that open for business? Solomon in Kariba says, why is it that he says, for as long as those MPs try to justify money in the streets on an ethical business practice, I think I don't think we are getting it right. Why is it that during the government of national unity there were no such kinds of practices? And the answer is straight there. The country is not producing enough locally imported goods, and they want capital flight. And he's just speaking to the issues of not enough production, too much money being used on imports, not enough Forex. Tinashe in Milton Park says the banking sector is just a disaster. No incentive at all to keep my money in the bank. Before this cash crisis started, I would ask my banker what she has to offer me to keep my 500 salary in the bank, and she would blatantly say nothing. Honorable Chafika, as long as there is arbitrage opportunities in the currency market, those traders will always be there. Solution is bring investment, boost exports, increase Forex in the country, then arbitrage will only have small margins and be left to banks who have bigger volumes. I'll read a couple of more contributions here because they're coming through thick and fast. Here we go, saying this government is not serious. Just last year, the former president went on a trip with a huge delegation. Isn't that externalization? Central bank governor was asleep on the job. That's the truth. He should go. All this list is fake news. That is Prof in Borodale. Thank you so much. The real Mbava is the Reserve Bank that raided Nostro balances and issued valueless TBs. Now they are trying to spin the consequences of being the fault of companies trading in Zimbabwe. The government stole our money, period. Our government raids property value with reckless abandon. Thank you so much for that contribution. We can't say that the government is toothless when it comes to dealing with money changes. The reality is that those money changes are being funded by someone in government, which is by the same people who are supposed to be dealing with this issue. So how can the dog bite itself? Nyakudirwa says he's in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Nyakudirwa, for getting in touch. Over to you, Richard, very quickly, and then we'll have some final parting shots from our panelists. But once again, just to reiterate and remind our listeners that we had invited and had confirmation from Honorable Gift Chimanikire of the MDCT. We anticipated his arrival. Unfortunately, when we tried to call him, when he didn't turn up for the show, his phone is now switched off. But Honorable Gift Chimanikire had confirmed, we invited him and he had confirmed that he would be part of this discussion. So unfortunately, he's not able to join us, but we had that confirmation. Over to you, Richard.
I think I'll start off by responding to an issue that regards the GNU era and lots of Forex being available and all of that. I'm sure we are all in agreement that such a situation prevailed, and as it prevailed, there were weak institutional interventions to curb the current crisis that we're in. Perfect, we're in agreement. But however, it is not enough for us to be only in agreement regarding that, but we need to look at a historical context that regards to issues of Forex in Africa. Forex has always been a challenge, and hence at some point there were propositions for Africa to have a singular currency. And we should also bear in mind that the currencies of Europe, the currencies of the West in particular, really have always been a challenge, and have been an impediment to our improvement of the industrial sector. So really it's not adequate to only limit issues of governance provisions to the GNU era, but you need to look at the historical context. And as if that is not enough, someone talks of bond notes and head towards bond notes, but you can't prescribe yet to a particular policy direction without sustainable alternatives. And equally, in as much as we are also arguing that we need to chuck these people out of the streets, while we are also using the same funds to send money to children studying abroad and all of that, without alternatives, really we can't do much. So we should have serious alternatives. And one other alternative that comes into mind is that of opening Zimbabwe for business. But as we're doing that, we should also be cognizant of even how we've been welcoming our Chinese counterparts, and how our openness to business in that regard has also decapitated our capacity to contain our Forex.
Honorable Madipaka, very quickly, closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I think, like I said earlier on, the responsibility to fight crime in the country or corruption in the country is ours together. And we need, as a parliament and even as government, to make sure that we take a real look at some of our pieces of legislation, like the Finance Act, Bank Use Promotion Act, the Exchange Control Act, and see whether the regulations are tight enough to be able to curtail externalization of funds. Lastly, I would want to say it's not enough even for government to just say, let's say no to corruption. Let us deal with those people that are found wanting in this regard. Mm-hmm. And people should be seen to have been dealt with by the majority of our people. Mm-hmm. If it means one should be arrested, convicted, then sent to jail, let it be. Because this is what the people are looking at. This is what the people want. We need to cleanse ourselves. If we fail to do that, we're going to live in the past again. I thank you.
Indeed. Lastly, Honorable Chafika.
Thank you very much. I think let me comment briefly on the GNU. Yes, I must acknowledge there was what I would call, I think, initial stability, which maybe I could term also forced stability. Forced stability in that it was short-lived. It was short-lived, and that stability was born out of hope. The people had hope that, okay, now that they are working together, there is no more political conflicts, maybe including foreign investors and so forth. But it was short-lived, and you find people were still back, foreign currency was still short. But I go back to ethical practice. Okay, in any country, foreign currency, very few countries where foreign currency is readily available. If foreign currency was readily available, why does America apply limits on how much money you can take out of America? If it was readily available, it's the biggest economy, and so is every other large economy, Japan and so forth. You can't just take, even if the money is in your bank account, you can't just take cash as much as you want. You say, okay, but the money is mine, I've got 10 million in the bank account, I fill suitcases and go to Zimbabwe with cash. You're not allowed, even though it's there. You are told you can only take $5,000. And that is, so it is. If you go to South Africa, for instance, okay, you want to change your money, if you've got $100, no individual will change it for you. And those are poor blacks in South Africa, maybe poorer than most of us, okay? And then they will fear, they say, no, I can't. In a shop, go there, there's a Peru the change. But here, people are busy waving US dollars and so forth. And we are so learned. We are with the highest literacy. Is the literacy cursed? Is it cursed? I mean, why can't we deploy that for development? So it's very disturbing. Yes, arbitrage, well, quite obviously, arbitrage is caused by distortions. And in this case, distortions which obviously have been left unchecked because people are treating the bond note differently and not consistent with the views of the governor of the Reserve Bank. That is one-on-one on the US dollar. And the practice now has resulted in distortions in pricing, and it's affecting the entire market. The nostril balances is a major challenge, okay, that obviously 70-30, okay, central bank takes 70 and the individuals are allowed maybe some 30%. I hope those figures are still the same like that. And obviously it impacts on the pricing because the money which is now using RTGS is now subject to these pricing premiums on the market, and therefore in the process fueling the exchange rate. So the solution, okay, we have to have discipline. We have to have ethical practice. We have to have a good corporate practice. okay, in Zimbabwe, and the institutions of monitoring and surveillance and supervising the laws, okay, including Parliament through oversight. We are limited to oversight. We can't do more than that. But we've got the police, we've got the Central Intelligence people, we've got all those. They must be activated and resourced to ensure that they carry out their jobs consistent with the current dispensation.
Honourable Minister, I must stop you there because we're out of time. Our next show is coming through. Larry is talking health matters. Be sure to stay tuned to that. I just want to thank my panel for coming through and for sharing these insights. Honourable David Chapfika, Honourable Oliver Mandipaka, both of the ruling ZANU-PF. Richard Mahomva is a political and public policy analyst. And once again, a reminder that Honourable Gifty Chimanikire had been invited and had confirmed. Unfortunately, it appears he couldn't be able to join us. We have been trying to reach him, but his phone is unreachable. So just to let you know that Honourable Gifty Chimanikire of the MDCT had confirmed he'd be joining us. Unfortunately, couldn't make it. Ask the MP only on ZFM Stereo, my station, your station. It is everybody's station. Keep it here for the rest of your evening's entertainment. Good night.